the Last Looks podcast team.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your Oscar nomination for your work on the film Frankenstein. Yay!
Thank you so much.
Very kind.
So excited for you guys. And the work being considered as makeup and hair for the overall film. Now, if you could each tell us your name and what your position on the film was.
Okay, well, I'm Mike Hill, and I'm the prosthetics designer.
I'm Cliona Furey, and I'm the hair designer.
Jordan Samuel, and I was the head of the makeup department.
Brilliant. So I'd love to know, when you first heard the news, I want to know those first thoughts that are going through your mind.
Surreal, pinch me.
Yeah, Guillermo had been talking to me about this for a long time, since we very first started working together on Pacific Rim. So it was really like, it was like a wow moment, like this is actually going to happen. Because there was a few times over the years where it was sort of brewing, but it didn't happen. And as you know how it works in this business. And then when the word came down, it was like, wow, this is really, really going to go down. So dream come true.
Amazing. And where were you, Jordan, when you found out that you'd been nominated?
It's a good question. I'm trying to remember now. Oh, I was home. I was home having coffee and waiting for it, watching the announcements. I was shocking. I had some friends with me too. It was exciting.
Oh, cool. Celebrate. Nice.
You go next, Mike.
Okay, where was I? I was probably in a hotel room on this tour we're on. I mean, what can you say? We worked very hard on this movie for a long time, so it was just, it just felt good. What can you say? To be committed by our peers in the industry was, extremely flattering, and still is.
Yeah.
I was passing a kidney stone in a hospital. I was in Emerge.
Oh boy! Wow.
Okay, this is. I don't know anything about that.
You have the best story for sure.
Yeah. And I planned to watch it in the morning at home, and I woke up at 5 a.m. in agony, and I now know what that's like. So I was in Emerge and saw it on my iPhone, and it was the pinch me, surreal feeling. Is this actually happening? And my next thought was right back to a little kid on a horse farm, and did you ever think this would happen, and no, and then to 17, 18 when I started in the business, and did I ever think this would happen? And absolutely not. So it took me to my childhood immediately.
Yeah, and bouncing off what Cliona said, I think the very first, it's even hard to cheer because you're kind of numb to it, the wonderful news. So it's more exciting for the people around you than yourself at that moment, because everyone starts to text you and call you and congratulate you, including your teammates. So it's hard to take in, but once you do, it was wonderful.
Awesome.
Very surreal.
Yeah.
Still feels pinch me moment. It hasn't hit me maybe. Yeah.
We're going to wake up and we didn't even start the movie yet. So it feels like.
That's so cool. So I would love for you guys to talk us through 3 characters from research and development right through to daily application. Who wants to start?
I'll go. Okay. So I think the most obvious one for me to start with is the creature himself. Being a fan of Frankenstein, just as Jordan is as well. And Guillermo, since we were little kids. So to be told that Guillermo is going to do the Frankenstein was, a wonderful moment. And right away, we started research. I went to Guillermo and asked him, what his thoughts was on this character, because it's such a big pop culture icon. There was a lot of pressure on your shoulders, to produce something original and something that feels modern but still set in the 18th century. So we began with, I would scope different maquettes. Guillermo would say what he liked and what he didn't like, simple, that kind of stuff. And then one evening, again, looking at 18th century surgery techniques, because I was adamant I didn't want this to look like a technological modern day monster. I had to make it look like it was from a textbook and could belong on a museum wall. And I had a phonology head in my house with all the lines drawn on it and the little inscriptions. It was obviously a modern remake of one of those, but I had one. And I thought, okay, maybe Victor blatantly just followed these lines of the period, and I took it down into his body. And it was, and I didn't know who was playing him at that time. So the creature kind of looks, it's in the same world, but it's not exactly what we ended up with Jacob. but it still had the same geometric shapes and stuff, because I was very adamant that I wanted people to walk and see this man, this thing, and say, oh, this is not an accident that's been resewn back together. This is somebody planned this. Somebody did this step by step. They made these geometric shapes and cuts that really don't make much sense in nature, but it gave it, certainly it was man's hand. You could tell they did it. And from there, I mean, originally we had another actor that I spent almost 8 months on developing this character. And then that didn't happen due to commitments. He had to be elsewhere. I think it was to do with the actor strike and stuff like that, kind of slowed it all down. So then we were told we needed, Guillermo sent me a list of 5 more actors whom I would consider facially and physically to be best, for this character. And to be honest, Jacob was the one I was least familiar with. So I did designs on all 5 of these people. And when it comes to Jacob's, I said to my partner, Megan, I said, hey, let's watch this young man. But let's not watch a movie. Let's put him on in an interview. And so I could see the real him as opposed to somebody he's impersonating. And and Jacob sat there, and he's already 6'5", and he was seated, but he has these long limbs, and he kind of does this like tall people kind of do with his wrists. And he had these big doe eyes and these long lashes that were very reminiscent of Boris Karloff in 1931. And I immediately texted Guillermo and I said, Guillermo, forget everything I said about the other guys. I think this is our man. And thankfully, he'd already agreed. And I think within a day later, the deal was struck. So we got Jacob Elordi. From there, I had Jacob scanned by my friends at Odd Studios in Australia, because he was in Australia at the time.
Nice.
They sent scanned to me, and they molded his head and shipped the life to me. And then it was, basically standard the prosthetic procedure, and I start sculpting the pieces on Jacob. See what Guillermo likes or doesn't like, trying to figure out how it works with his body. And what I became aware of is that don't cover him up too much. Don't put too much rubber on him. I mean, it seems like it since we use 42 appliances on him, but a lot of them are only small appliances. There's nothing huge on the man because our version of the creature is that Victor wanted to make a statue that looked graceful and looked like marble and not look like a hat job. So, and Jacob was, he was there already. So I didn't want to obstruct that, and by covering it in rubber. So a lot of this makeup, and the reason why it took so long the makeup to apply was it was literally a new paint job every single day. And there was 5 of us on him as well for 10 hours. So it was, but the results are there. Jacob really was made for this part, The full makeup consisted of 42 silicone appliances. Some were minor, some were major. The pieces were actually run over at HillHair Effects Studios, because besides the creature, I had to be making the corpses and the puppets and stuff like that too. So Jason Hamer's company did an amazing job of that. We worked on a couple of different grades, so we got the soft and one. The ones on the body were a little bit stiffer than the facial ones, of course. Anything that's interesting is that because the creature's made up of these lines, these pieces that butt up together, I decided to not go the normal way and have overlapping appliances, which you can have a bit of room for error on that because you can nudge it here or nudge it there. These ones I did separate, so they butted up to each other along every seam, and that was the most innovative part for me. The pieces were pre-painted, before we laid them. And again, it was a 5-man team. There was, and it was long hours. We started at midnight, and we finished at 10 in the morning sometimes, depending on what mood Demo was in. If you needed him a bit sooner, but it was usually a 10-hour thing, and that's included with Jacob's little breaks and stuff like that. And again, like I mentioned, it was literally a paint job. We sat to make certain areas body look like marble, certain areas to be almost translucent to look like alabaster. And I designed the makeup to have these purple, blue, green hues that you don't really see on a creature of this kind. I certainly didn't want to go with zombified skin, because Guillermo himself has taught me, that there's beauty in imperfection. So I wanted him to be, I wouldn't say rainbow color, but I think he could have these pretty colors and still, when the time come, shift from looking beautiful to looking really menacing.
I will say, and this is probably a bit gross to hear, but the colors reminded me a little bit of, I did a 2-day course in butchery and yeah, gross. Yeah, and when they strung the pig up and opened opened him up on his tummy, and I was expecting like this mess of guts to come out. But what came out was just such beautiful, soft, kind of pastel-y colors that I just couldn't quite believe what I was seeing, because it was weirdly so beautiful. But those colors are kind of what reminded me of the paint that you
Yeah, I
were
mean,
doing. Yeah.
you know, bodies of it's nasty to sound, human beings or animals, are really are beautiful inside and out. I mean, however nature came up with this array of beauty is, once you look past the gore aspect,
Yeah.
it's actually really beautiful, and you can work with that, I feel.
That's awesome. And how did Jacob go with having that applied for such a long period of time and all that type of thing?
When I first talked with Jacob via Zoom, just like this, I wanted to let him know what he was in for, because that's the best thing to tell someone, because he'd never wore a heavy prosthesis like this. And well, who has? It's a lot of prostheses.
Yeah.
So I just said to him, look, I told him how hard this is going to be, how long it's going to be, and how it takes time to finesse this stuff. I said, you'll be seeing me at 2 a.m. and you'll hate the sight of me walking in the makeup room. And I says, and I'll hate the sight of you sat in that chair, because we're going to do. But actually, that never happened. Jacob Elordi is the most patient man I've ever met. He never did even. And my two friends here can clarify that he doesn't complain ever. Nothing is too big, nothing's long. He wanted to be this creature. He wanted to encompass the creature and not be Jacob Elordi. He really wanted to push that paradigm to one side and become this other being. And Guillermo explained to him originally that it's going to be his sacrament to sit in that chair and transform into this new being. And Jacob really took that to heart. And like I say, I've never worked with anyone as patient or as professional as Jacob Elordi.
Well, yeah, that's definitely going to help. Amazing.
Absolutely,
Awesome. Who would like to speak next?
I can go if you want. So yeah, I guess the logical thing is to talk about Oscar. I guess to talk about Frankenstein, to talk about Victor. Victor was a really is a really interesting character, not by virtue of the fact that the movie's named after him and the story's named after him, the original book, but Victor's actually he's a kind of a cool character from a makeup perspective, because he really embodied every single thing that we were able to do on this movie, my team and myself. Taking him from his sort of youthful, vibrant London look through to the look at the end of the film, or the beginning of the film for that matter, where he's about to die in the Arctic from exposure and everything that he's been through. So he was like a checklist of every single thing that we did in the movie, with maybe one or two exceptions. He didn't have a bald cap on, but other than that, we really checked all the boxes with him. It was like every tool in the toolbox was used. Ironically, or not so ironically, I mean, like it is in most films, we didn't start in chronological order. The very first time we saw him on screen was when he is literally close to death, and took dog sledding across the Arctic, which for me was kind of a cool thing to do from a makeup perspective, because I was able to sort of set what I guess would at that point be almost like the second last version of what he looked like. So it's almost like starting the bar fight scene at the end of the fight before a punch has been thrown. So we were able to work backwards from there. His Arctic breakdown look, his dying look, was basically, it was a combination of things. There were some small transfer appliances that he wore. He had a piece on his nose and a piece on his cheek, no bigger than like say a quarter. And the rest of it was all paint job. It was all just contour and highlighting to really bring out the bones of his face, make his eyes look sunken. Obviously, because of what he'd been through in the environment that he was in, to break his skin down and make him look like he was suffering from severe exposure. Used a combination of things on him. It varied depending on where we were and the environment we were in. But generally, it was a little bit of, I would stipple a little bit of Telesis or silicone adhesive onto his cheeks and his forehead and the bridge of his nose. And then on top of that, I would stipple on some Super Baldies just to get kind of that raised sort of dry skin texture. And then again, like washes were used over top of that to bring out the texture. At that point in the film, he was wearing he was wearing facial hair pieces that were pre-made. Don Rivard made those for me. There were this stunning beard and mustache piece that actually fit into the existing sideburns that we had for him too. And then the fun of that was that it was actually all pre done ahead of time. There was nothing. There was very little kind of snow and ice added after the fact. It was done ahead of time. And in our research that we did, we worked through like, I don't know how many products we played around with. I want to say like at least 8 or 10 products. But what we finally came down to using really simply was just melted stearic acid. We picked up some wax melting pots from beauty supplies. That was the easiest way to do it. And we would just melt stearic acid down and paint it into the facial hair. It was super easy to put on and super easy to take off if we needed to. It just sort of crumbled away when you wanted it to, but it stood up in the elements, it stood up out in the cold, it stood up in the heat on the sound stage. It was pretty effective looking. And I think there was a certain point in the story too where we decided, Oscar and I had discussed it, and I mean, he pretty much, it was pretty grueling for him, but he pretty much had a tear stick through like 3/4 of the schedule. His eyes were always bloodshot and watery, with the very exception of the beginning of the movie when he's, young Victor in what we were calling his London look, in the lecture hall. We tested the Arctic look, definitely. The London look, his sort of healthy, natural look was really just a matter of putting Oscar together to look like the best version of Oscar. So, I warmed his skin up. I accentuated his brow shape. For me, when I'm doing any kind of a breakdown makeup, or breakdown makeup is essentially, I approach it the same way I would as an aging makeup. I try to, if the opportunity exists, and it did here, to kind of really dial up the actor's features, make him look a little bit warmer, make him look a little more virile, accentuate his brows, lash line, things like that. Even on an actor mascara, anything I can do to really dial them up, and that just kind of gives me more real estate to take them further off in the other direction when the time comes, because it's a matter of sort of removing elements. So instead of like building something up, I'm actually removing elements. So there was I'd say probably by the time we got to the lab, I was removing the elements that I had infused into his look at the very beginning. So I didn't accentuate his brows. I didn't accentuate his eyes. I was starting to add a little bit of breakdown under his eyes. I was starting to desaturate his skin tone a little bit and pull a little bit of the warm color out of his skin tone. And then it was just a matter of building on it from there, as I said, and getting to the point where I was actually doing a full breakdown makeup on him with alcohol activated paints, which was the go-to for me. Like I said, hollowing his eyes out, building up the brow bone and the cheekbone around his eyes, and cracking his lips, and anything I could do to make him look as bad as possible. Basically, at the end was where I was aiming for, which is hard to do with Oscar because he's a great-looking guy.
Yeah. But it gives you that, you've got that range to like be able to get there because he looks so good. So you can,
Do you want me to start on Elizabeth's hair? Is that sorry?
Yeah.
Well, Guillermo's direction was basically, we knew it was Mia Goth, and Mia has her own look, as you know. She's very interesting looking. She's not your typical actress face, and he wanted it to. He said very long, and when Guillermo says very long, that means really long. He likes long hair. And after seeing Kate's, the costume designer, Kate Hawley's designs, and going into her shop and seeing the fabric colors and things like that, I could see the scale we were going was very operatic. The dresses were going to be huge, and the malachite colors and the blue colors. So I chose the color that I did, and I knew that the wig had to be really intense and really dense, a lot of hair for it to balance with the costumes and be so striking. So yeah, I had 2 wigs made for her. One was her updo wig, and it was very long and thick as well, but probably 24 inches, I think. And then of course Stacy Butterworth, my wig maker, she makes all my wigs. She's incredible. She made the long wig, which had panels to get all that length, and of course in that color. It's not like I found hair that that length. It was 54 inches in total. So many panels and a lot of hair. And I think it was 30 ounces that wig weighed. So 1.9 pounds of hair. And it worked out really well. And in terms of styling it, it was just a matter of dealing with all those panels. And, you know, at the end of the night, it was a lot of work after wrap, of course, getting it ready, getting the tangles out and things. And I really just braided it in a certain way to get a natural texture into it. And then I would take the irons and sort of tousle the ends to make that look, you know, really pretty. And then I used the other wig for her updo and actually cut it even shorter at the sides so that I could deal with more control and not have to deal with 24-inch hair because she had so many bonnets, lots of bonnets. Right. And so her thing was many costumes, many striking costume, bonnets on and off. Bonnet came off on camera in one scene, which Guillermo will do. And I cut the updo wig much shorter on the sides because I was pulling those sides back and decided to use chignon pieces instead so that I could work quicker in the chair, but also control the style more because I could style the chignon on the block, and I had about 6 chignons around. And so I would just slide the wig, sweep the fronts from the center back over her ears and sort of put the back up in a basic braid bun and then add all my chignons to emulate all that hair as best I could.
Oh, that's really smart.
Yeah.
When you say panels, what do you mean? Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Oh, panels, drop panels to get that extra length because the hair comes at the most, if you're lucky, 36 inches long. So sometimes you can get really lucky and buy hair that's 50 inches, and that's just not the norm. So, and not in the color I needed. So to get the length, you attach drop panels to the wig. So they're like ladders of weft on a ladder system that drop down underneath the wig.
All right. And is that attached to the wig at all times, or is that something that you put on before or after the wig? Or
well, I have to credit Stacy because she came up with the idea and design to do this in a really unorthodox way. Normally the panels are attached to the wig. You know, you have your wig and you put it on in one unit, and they're sort of sewn to the bottom of the wig and hanging down the person's back. But I was really concerned about the weight on that front lace because everything was full lace glued on Mia. And as you know, wigs that are heavy want to pull back. And I was really worried about all that weight stress and how we're going to do this. And Stacy came up with a system of actually attaching the wefts to Mia's head, to her wig prep underneath the wig, and then putting the wig over top. And it was a little scary, and I thought, well, if I don't like it, I'll just sew them on because I'm a wig maker, so I'll be okay with that. But it worked out really, really well, and it allowed a lot more movement in the hair, as well as she didn't feel that weight on her lace, and I didn't have to worry about anything ripping or anything. And it was her body and her shoulders and her head held the weight more than, you know, a wig be pulling back on you all day for that many hours. So that was different. It worked out really well.
Awesome. Now, who talks about Oscar's hair, actually, as well?
I do. Guillermo wanted his hair to show the time transitions. So there were 3 distinct phases. I think there were more phases for his makeup and his face, but for the hair, we had we used his own hair. And for the London look, he was very, healthy looking, that rich, deep, dark brown, shiny, let his natural, enhance his natural curls. And Tim Nolan came in and looked after Oscar's hair and did a beautiful job. And there was a middle scene where I had handmade wefted pieces made. And there's a transition where the hair sort of grows to a mid-length and then gets longer at the end in the outpost area. And he poor Guillermo becomes the monster. He starts to resemble the monster. So he starts to come apart and look weathered and all those elements Jordan mentioned with his makeup. So the hair went to a more weathered, dried out, frizzled look. And I had Stacy make a lovely wig. So it was actually a U wig. So for the longer look, and we were able to use Oscar's own hairline and the top of his hair and integrate it with the wig, which had, some little gray pieces in it, not as shiny. And I had taken some bleach and lightened some, put some lighter colors in there to emulate, the sun had weathered it. And then Tim is a great color person too, and he made it even better and improved that. So, he basically goes from that sort of healthier young London look guy to he becomes like the creature in the end.
That's awesome. And Jordan, did you want to speak on Elizabeth's makeup?
There was a lot of conversation at the beginning about what to do with Mia and where to take her. And I think I took my main inspiration, from, as Cliona already mentioned, seeing some of the stuff that Kate was developing in her shop. She had some incredible fabrics. And I know, just to speak to the wardrobe for a minute, because it kind of ties back to, what influenced my choices with Oscar and certainly influenced my choices with Mia. There was almost like a kind of a 1970s like rock and roll vibe to both of them. Specifically with Oscar's sort of silhouette and what he was wearing and the fabrics he was wearing, it had a sort of very, very sort of punk rock vibe to it. And getting back to Mia's fabrics, again, were not really traditional fabrics for the era. They were a lot of like really 70s kind of like fashion forwards, late 60s, early 70s fabrics that Kate was working with. So it kind of inspired me. So what I ended up doing, and again, we did it in close conference, Kate and I, was I started to look into some 60s and 70s vibes as far as the makeup look goes. So what I ended up going for, and I really leaned into, I think most of all, was a very kind of like twiggy kind of Biba look. So it almost had almost like a browless, and I say browless, I just mean less emphasis on the brow, if any emphasis on the brow at all, and more of almost like a smoked kind of, smoky kind of like 60s, 70s throwback to like silent film makeup. So there was a lot of like definition in the socket line. The eyes sort of became, they kind of took on almost like a sort of a haunted vibe where they were really deep set, and then the lids were accentuated, sort of heavy, sort of bedroom looking 1920s silent film, twiggy sort of Biba vibe to the whole thing. And what we learned early on, which was really interesting, because we didn't go to Scotland till the very end of the shoot, which is where predominantly most of our background were, for the wedding scenes and things like that. But what ended up happening, which is sort of a bit of a good luck or twist of fate, was we found out that Kate was going to be using a lot of veils down the road. So what I ended up doing was designing Elizabeth's makeup and subsequently every other female in the movie to make sure that those eyes and the features read through the veils. And what we ended up with down the road was a really kind of interesting kind of ghost-like sort of specter vibe that the women had when we saw them in the crowd scenes at the wedding, for example. So it kind of evolved that way. It was a lot of fun to put together. It's a very simple makeup, but it's very, in its simplicity, it's very theatrical. Kind of the best way I can describe it. So it's really natural. So again, Elizabeth didn't really change through the story. She's sort of the one character that stays sort of, that anchors, her look anchors the whole look of the film. She's sort of, porcelain skinned and sort of those smoky haunted eyes and a really natural lip. And I really, at no point did I ever lay anything into Mia's eyebrows. I almost let the contour from the socket line just blend right up onto the brow bone and almost disappear into her eyebrows.
Beautiful.
Jamie, can I mention a fourth character here? Okay.
Sure.
The character that Jordan and Cliona and myself collaborated on the most was actually Claire Frankenstein, which was Mia Goth playing Victor's mother. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't notice what we did, that we actually did transform. People think it's a different actress. Mm-hmm. And so for my part of that, I designed and sculpted a brown nose piece that had a little bit of Oscar in there, Oscar's frown in there, because I was seeing that she'd come from, she's in a loveless marriage, she's pregnant and she's sick. So she'd had a little bit of frown in there that Mia herself didn't have. And then I built up the brow to be more Oscar-esque. And then Megan and I glued that piece down to Mia, and then we would make it the very basic human skin, and then we would hand that over to Jordan, and Jordan can take it from there.
So once Mike had applied the prosthetic to Mia's forehead for Claire, it was really a matter of trying to. My goal essentially was to try to imbue characteristics into her features that were basically completely opposite of what I was doing with Elizabeth. So, Elizabeth had a really nude lid. In fact, I was using a little bit of almost like a slightly pearl toned ivory color in the center of her eyelid to make her eyelids really pop out and look a little bit shiny for Elizabeth. With Claire, it was the complete opposite. I was actually pulling a darker, a natural shadow that was found in her skin tone, but across the entire eyelid. So the idea being obviously that there's a reference that Oscar makes to the fact that his father hated their sort of swarthy skin and their words. What's the I can't even think of the quote.
The raven hair, or something.
Oh yeah. Just that they're both raven haired and of a darker complexion. So I tried to imbue that into into Claire's look, and it really ended up just being trying to do everything I could to be the opposite of what we had done with Elizabeth. Obviously the obvious thing being chosen is accentuating and darkening and establishing a brow on Claire that wasn't there on Elizabeth.
Yeah, and then Stacy made a wig for Claire, and Mike and I talked about a lower hairline that was more resembling Oscar, but I was actually Googling Oscar's real mother to see what her hairline looked like, because I didn't want it to be a man's hairline. So found a happy medium there and dropped Mia's hairline down quite a bit. It actually doesn't read as much as it actually was lower. I think I was 1.5 inches lower on her hairline with the prosthetic on. And so we made that wig. And I do remember when we tested it, I'll speak for myself. I hated my work. I hated the wig, and I had all these things I wanted to change, but we did have time. So we refronted the wig to get a little more highlights in it and some, browns, and so that it wasn't so dark. And I just find sometimes too with prosthetics, I find that you need to soften a little bit. I don't know what it is, but I found the wig too harsh. And we ended up softening the hairline in a nice way, and Stacy put some lovely mohair in there, and so that was actually a lot of fun. That was the one thing that the three of us were able to work together on, because the creature, Mike, was in his own sort of world there, and I'd come into work at 4:35 a.m. And they would have been at it since 10 or 11 the night before, and then they'd still do the same day with us. So we would see each other on set, but Claire was the only time we really, truly created together in a room together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And can I say that in a movie like this, the fact that we were on set, all three of us, Claire, Cliona, Jordan, and myself, and Mia was in her prostheses and get up for Claire Frankenstein. And actually, Netflix themselves came up to me and said, "Is that Mia? We can't tell." And that was in person. A lot of people were very, very confused on set, because you could still see it was Mia, but I think we just hit between the three was just the right line to not be too heavy, because you're not really meant to notice. And another quick little tidbit is reading the script and Guillermo saying, "I want Mia to play both parts." I was kind of like confused, but he's the boss and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But after watching the movie for the first time, the realization kicked in that when Victor first meets, Elizabeth, he sees his mom, and then it finally clicked in, and I was like, there's Guillermo. That's the genius of Guillermo del Toro.
A lot of
Yeah,
subliminal
absolutely.
work with Guillermo. There's always so much depth to everything. And I don't even know everything that's going on in all the movies.
I mean, we could have all pushed that makeup further. We could have given dentures, we could have given lenses, but I think what we did was just enough to fool the audience, and I'm very proud of that character.
Yeah. I kind of wish I didn't know before I watched it.
Oh, we'll never do that.
So each year, the nominated films showcase such a wonderful range of work. How do you feel your work differs from your fellow nominees?
That's a really hard question. I really don't want to compare myself to other nominees.
Not comparing, it's just there's differences,
Yeah. All I can, I mean, there were different movies, there were different genres, and I think everyone nominated are just incredible in this field, and we're proud to be stood with them. And so I am, as far as what was different. I don't know. I did a nearly naked dead man is what I did that was different. That's all I can think. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
I was actually drawing more parallels with us and the nominees, especially too with the ugly stepsister. I was seeing in the Elvira character, I was seeing Victor Frankenstein, how I would empathize when they were younger, and then you felt so sorry for them, and then they want something so badly that there's at any cost, and they lose their total moral compass and kind of become quite mean. And so I was drawing more parallels, but I think the one thing that might be different is they're different periods, of course. But Frankenstein has the prosthetic is not a biopic, and it's not a zombie. It's not a human that is affected by something and changes. It's the creature. That's the one thing I might say is different, is the creature character.
Well
Plus
said.
we have different periods, I think, too.
Well said, Cliona. You said it better than I
Yeah.
did. Well done.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an exciting year this year. I mean, I'm as the other guys have said, I'm so honored to be a part of this, and it's an incredible experience. But I think it's an interesting year. I think it's an exciting year for the voters, because I don't think any of these films are like each other. I think they all stand apart in their own way, and I think that is a really, really, really cool thing about all the nominees this year. I think they're all so different and so outstanding in their own rights. I think that's what sets us apart, each and every one of us, and it's a really cool year to be a part of this.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Jordan's so right, that actually very, very correct, because when we did the Bake Off and looking up at the films, they were all so different. It was all makeup, but it was apples and oranges. Everything was so different, and that was exciting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what did you find to be your biggest challenge during filming? If you could pick one thing, what was it?
For me, it was the amount of time for the creature. Plus, also, we had another actor for 8 months, who then, due to scheduling, as we said, that didn't. So I only had Jacob for a very short period. That was the most challenging for me. We really didn't get to test Jacob. It was very tricky, and we didn't really when he got to test Mia's Claire makeup, the three of us, on set, and the next day she was playing. So for me, it was timing. It was a problem.
An interesting thing about one of the things about working with Guillermo, and we've all been working with him for some time, to varying degrees, but somebody said something a little while ago, and I don't remember where it was. It was at one of the Q&As, and I thought, oh, that's just so on the nose. Somebody had said, oh, yeah, it was actually, give credit to where it's due. It was Jacob who actually observed it, because he's sort of the newest member of the family. And he made a comment, and I thought, wow, that is just so on point. And he said, it was an enlightening thing to hear. And he said, that he realized shortly after starting that Guillermo had collected and curated this team of people over the years who he'd been grooming all of us. Like, we all understand his language, his visual language. We understand. We basically, when we speak to him, and when we speak to each other, we almost speak in shorthand. And there's a really I'm really grateful to have been a part of that and to be a part of this family. So my answer to the question of what the hardest thing about this show is, and it's the hardest thing about working with him all the time. But it's just that's why everyone brings their A game. And I don't remember what department it was. I want to say maybe it was the physical, like special effects department that came up with this, but they made a T-shirt. So I think that was those guys made a T-shirt, and it just summed it all up. And it said the T-shirt said on it everything all at once. And with Guillermo, that's the way it is. And I think these guys can attest to it as well. You have to have everything ready all the time, because it might be a matter of like the weather has changed, or Guillermo got a brilliant idea in the middle of the night and we're not shooting what was on the call sheet now, we're switching to something else. But that's it's the biggest challenge and the biggest gift of working with him on his projects, is that you have to have everything ready at any moment. You have to be ready to like just jump in and make it happen. An example for me that I can give you, from a makeup perspective, is that, the Harlander bald cap, the syphilis bald cap look that we see in the film, was supposed to shoot, if I recollect properly, I want to say like a month and a half later in the schedule than when it actually shot. And I ended up having to spend a weekend in the trailer by myself building that bald cap, like a month and a half before it was supposed to happen. And that's just the way it goes. And you just we all have to pull together and just make it happen. And but it's being driven by, the passion for what we all do and how much we love our jobs and how much we love Guillermo.
Yeah, and actually bouncing off what Jordan just said, he's so right about Guillermo. For me, like the one of the creatures looks when he gets exploded by the dynamite. The first one we did was too heavy because we'd never tested it until the day, and it was too heavy. So I had to sit up the entire night and then rescope, remold, and redo a new appliance for the next day. And then he'd call you and say, hey, I want his hair shorter in this scene. So we'd have to take one of my hero wigs and I'd sit and trim those down. Same as and then he wanted the shaving scene to be different than we'd planned. So then two of my team, Samantha and Megan, had to stay up all night long punching hair. And then he wanted the buzz cut look. So I had to call in Jordan to help me to flock the head of the creature there. So that is what he does. He's on the fly like that. And actually, a different movie, but Cliona and I just did a project now for Netflix, so Guillermo's involved in. And last moment, he wanted the creature to have this hair, So over the weekend, Cliona came up with these braids that we use for. I can't say more about the project, but that's how it works. Guillermo gives us stuff on the fly, and we have to go to each other and say, please help.
Yeah. Cliona?
These guys have touched on it. That for me, with having so many wigs made, and this movie in particular, you had most of the men in wigs and most of the women, and other characters, secondary characters, all in wigs, and including double wigs, like the long red wig. There's 5 duplicates of that wig for stand-in, photo double, stunt double, and then 2 prosthetic Elizabeth dummies. So we had to make cheaper versions that look the same, which was Don Rivard was incredible in helping me with that. But it's keeping up with Guillermo. And I say it with love, and that's why we love him, and that's why we work with him. And it makes us better at what we do. But honestly, you will not... Can anyone remember? Was it like sextuplet pink script? I mean, the script changes. You will not work with anyone and see so many script changes, and you can't not read them. Like it's like, Elizabeth, this is Mia, is now in the long hair, and she trips on her face and falls in a puddle. Things like that. Major things that affect us all. It's not just words like most projects we tend to do. And it's keeping up with you get a new one line once a week is slow for us. It's that, and I had to have someone hired remotely to read the script changes and send to me what I needed to know. And it just becomes a challenge when you're having so many wigs made and you have your dates. So you know how we all look at the one line and we know when certain wigs are due and when we need them for camera, and we get them done a little early for maybe testing and working on them. No, not me. I'm always a month ahead of him because I call it, he makes soup. That's what I do when I see the script changes and when I get emails that say, well, Cliona, now I want this, and it's something totally different. as much as I don't want to imply he's not a good about prep, he's very prepped. We all get our prep. But like you said, Mike, he's on the fly. He rolls with it, and he starts getting ideas and starts rewriting stuff. And then, as I say, he makes soup because he's got all the ingredients. He's got us. He's got the set. He's at the location for the day, and he's got all of us there. And he just starts saying, "Well, nah, I think I'll make this, and I'll do this." And that can be a big challenge keeping up with him. And my other challenge was he likes everything practical, which we all love about him too. He likes handmade work and practical things, which means all those chandeliers at the wedding and in the mansions are real candles with wax dripping on all my wigs. And so half of my job with that long red wig, for instance, was picking wax out of that wig, and Mia walking around with the candelabra, kind of like this, in the cells, with all that hair swinging behind her, and Cliona's heart was in her throat, standing beside the guy with the fire extinguisher. That was a little bit of a too.
That's awesome. So we are constantly learning. So I would love to know one thing that you guys, a lesson that you learned, or something you learned or took away from this experience.
I'll let somebody else go first so I can steal their idea. Go ahead.
For me, I think it would have to be, it wasn't a new lesson, but I think definitely more than any other time in my career, this movie reinforced how important collaboration is and how important teamwork is and how important it is to have just an incredible group of people behind you to count on. And I had an amazing, amazing team on this movie that I will be forever indebted to, because this would never have happened without them, without their passion and their skill and their commitment to this job. And again, being able to, pull people together, not to say it's the most important thing, but to be able to pull people together who can all think on their feet, and people that don't fall apart when something changes, Guillermo changes his mind, or we're forced to do something else because of weather or whatever the case may be. That was probably the biggest lesson that was reinforced for me.
I would agree with Jordan completely there, and I think for me the biggest was to with the red updo wig, or any female character that is ever changing updo where it's changing and they're wearing bonnets. I did it with this film, and I'm going to commit to it. I'm not going to deal with a 24-inch wig. I'm going to use something a little longer than shoulder and just stick chignons on, because then you have more control. And if a hair comes loose and you're dealing with such long hair that's wrapped and braided into something, it's impossible. So for me, that was a light bulb moment to really go for it and take that approach.
Yeah, I've got to again agree with Cliona and Jordan, because I kind of answered this question just recently. It's teamwork, and it's not just in our departments. It's a teamwork with Kate, and it's the teamwork with Tamara Sets, and it's teamwork with Dan's lighting. Guillermo makes you all talk to each other to make this a cohesive whole. And again, another good thing about these teams and on set is, for instance, again, the Frankenstein, we had to do a buzz call, and I didn't have a flocker with me, so I had to call on Jordan to help me with that. So I can knock on Jordan's door or Cliona's door and ask advice and ask for help on anything, and it's a given. It is just a team, and that I'm truly grateful for, because there's moments when you need help. It doesn't matter whom you are. Everybody needs help, but sometimes, and they say we were in at 4 a.m. Well, Jordan would come and bring us a coffee when he came in. He knew we'd been working hard, and he'd come and bring us a coffee at 4 a.m. So it really,
I forgot about that.
It's a great team effort, And again, right down to Kate, we all conferred with Kate on her wonderful costumes, because we had to balance against her colors. And against, for me, the creature, what is the color like for his hair? How can his hair lie on that color, etc., etc. So it's a lot more in depth. And it's only when you sit back now and get asked these questions, you remember all this in-depthness that we really did on this movie. But again, it was the greatest time ever.
Awesome. And well, speaking of teams and people, did you want to take a moment to give a shout out to those that helped you on the project?
Sure.
100%. I can start.
Go ahead.
Oriana, Kristen, Trish, Lizzie, Kath, Scotty, like the list goes on. Like I think I did a head count, and I think at the end of the day there was about it was close to 50 people that worked with me on this movie, and it was and they were like, I'm talking like roll your sleeves up and get dirty, and yeah, I can't thank everybody enough. The makeup artists who came out, I mean, they really gave it their all. Everybody came to work as if it was their job, and they did it, and it shows.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm going to say a big shout out to Stacey Butterworth and Dawn Rivard. And Dawn was also a hairstylist with me on my team, but happens to be a wig maker. So, and other wig makers are Jerry Altenberg, Isaac Griffin. We had so many double wigs and things as well. Tori Benz, Tim Nolan, who did Oscar's hair, Katerina, Dawn Rivard, Sandra Trailhard, and then Laura Solari was my rock star in UK. She looked after all my UK crowd, her and Keely, Emma, and Neve, and as well as 13 or 14 or more UK amazing hairstylists that came out, and they were incredible. They didn't even know me, some of them, and they'd come up and go, "Can we get you something? Can we help you in any way?" And they did beautiful work, and we had a little family going there, and they were incredible.
For me, I'd like to start at the beginning, which was long before shooting. So, as I said, Odd Studios scanned and molded Jacob's head for me. I had Christina make the contact lenses for the creature. Gary Archer made his teeth, because what Guillermo wanted, and rightly so, is he wanted bigger teeth in the creature. Even though the creature does have human teeth, he wanted them slightly bigger because they can get lost in a prosthetic makeup. So he wanted that bit bigger. From there, we had Noah, who was helping us sculpt the blown out body parts. I, of course, have Megan, my partner, who's basically supervising and doing all the stuff I don't want to do, as well as painting and hair punching, etc. Then we had Adam Bean, who was out through the digital side of things, figuring things out. I hope I'm not forgetting nobody. And on set, we had Richard, Samantha, and Michael. Megan and myself were doing the whole body, so I'd like to thank those four profusely for the long hours. And then in England, me and Meg had Darren Longfond and Ruth Parry helping us apply the makeup as well, which was their first time to do it, and it was even more pressure. But yeah, all of the above. Oh, and Brooke Barker also created the wigs for the creature too. I'd like to thank Brooke for that.
Awesome. Okay, guys, a massive congratulations again, and enjoy the ride, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for
Thank you so
having
much.
us.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.